Right, we'll start again. Sorry about that. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is open to the press and public. This meeting is being broadcast live, and the recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting is concluded. We welcome the use of Welsh language in meetings, but I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please, can members online refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. May I remind members that, as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking, and please do not interrupt discussions until you have notified us of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Right, moving on to the agenda. Welcome and apologies. Jade, do we have any apologies?
Thanks, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor James and Councillor Williams this morning.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members, do we have any declarations with regards to the item we are scrutinising today?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
And I'd like to declare I'm a member of the Corporate Parenting Panel.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm also a member of the Corporate Parenting Panel, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn.
As am I, Chair. And me, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Agenda item 3, minutes from our meeting of the 13th of March 2025. Members, a reminder that these are the minutes from the last meeting where we scrutinised social worker caseloads. Could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 4, our action sheet. Rebecca, could you please run through our action sheet, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just to remind members, there are 2 actions on the action sheet from 2 previous meetings. One was the joint meeting with Education with regards to early years. The update on the information you requested at that meeting has been circulated to members on the 25th of March. And then the recommendations from the last meeting on the 13th of March, they have been circulated, the responses to those as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is our topic for scrutiny today, which is eliminating or removing the profit agenda. Before we commence discussions, I would like to welcome Councillor Richard Clark, Executive Member for Children and Families and Education, and Councillor Clark has joined us online. I'd like to introduce Jason O'Brien, who is our Strategic Director for Children and Families and Education, Kirsty Cook, Group Manager, Children and Family Services, and Bethel Coville, our Commissioner Manager. I'd also like to welcome representatives of Heading, formerly Mellin, online. So Mike Lyles, hello, and have we been joined by Jodine? Yeah. Yes. Well, welcome to Michael and Jodine Bishop. Thanks for joining us today. Moving along then. Who would like to introduce our report for today? I beg your pardon? We're going straight into the question then.
All right, okay.
Thank you. And I'll kick us off with question 1. The Act means that this is a direct quote from paragraph 3.2 of the report. The Act means that new placements in restricted services, which include for-profit residential homes, secured accommodation and fostering providers, will not be permitted other than in exceptional circumstances from April 2030. Have we or will we receive guidance or framework of what exceptional circumstances would constitute? What process would be involved? And who would need to authorise an exceptional circumstance placement?
Thank you. I'll take that question. So the Act has given some guidance around supplementary placements, and as detailed, it's within when there's exceptional circumstances. So in terms of our actions when we are seeking approval from Welsh ministers, we would need to provide a statement setting out the reasons why we are seeking that approval. We would need to be able to evidence that there's no alternative placement for that child or young person, and that the placement requested would be based on their needs and meeting their needs best, that it's the most appropriate placement for them, essentially. And then that application would be made to the Welsh ministers for approval.
And it would be the Welsh Minister who approves or not?
Yes, that's correct.
I think in many ways, Shares, as well, it would follow the similar process locally that we have for our unregulated placements, which are our placements that where we unavoidably have to place children in placements that are not fully registered with CIW. And in the first instance, there, with locally, there's an authorisation at least come from director level as well. So there'd be a couple of sort of safeguards in place really to ensure that we were doing the right course of action for that young person.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Watkins.
Thank you. Do you have a timeline from the time that you obviously deem it's necessary to have an exceptional placement to getting that paperwork off and having a response, so that we know then we can place that child in the suitable placement?
I think that this is still kind of evolving in terms of exactly what that timeline would look like. So the information I've shared is from the Act directly. Yeah, I think that's all I can comment.
In terms of a timeline as well, it would be around the responsiveness and the need. So it could be that we could be faced with a looked after child requiring residential accommodation this evening, for example, if this legislation were all up and running and active now. It could be that we could require placement for this evening. For me, at that point, the authorisation then would sit with me to authorise that child could go into an exceptional circumstance placement, as is termed here, and then we would, I guess, have to pick up the pieces the next day or throughout that coming week with Welsh Government or with CIW. But it would be, you know, if we've got a child that's presenting today, we will act based upon the immediate needs of that child.
Question 2. Councillor Seaborn.
Good morning all. Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points to my question, which relates to 3.3 in the report. To minimise disruption, different parts of the Act will come into effect at different times. Does this staggered approach to implementation fully ease pressure on us and, more importantly, minimise disruption for our children and young people? That's the first point. And are these new deadlines achievable? That's the second point. And the third point, I'll have a supplementary if that isn't answered in the question.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of easing pressure, you know, it's no secret that the whole Eliminate agenda has placed a level of pressure on us because we have to go through different planning mechanisms now, and I guess strategically we've got a different set of priorities in terms of our placement sufficiency. So there is a pressure there. However, I think through the processes that we've gone through in terms of the consultation for Eliminate with Welsh Government here, that pressure has been eased and alleviated. And in this, you know, some of the timescales have changed based upon the feedback that local authorities have given as part of this legislation, as part of this policy move forward. And that's been reflected in some of those timescales changing for us, and that staggered approach. Like I say, there will be a pressure. That pressure is because there's a change in policy. However, we are getting our ducks in line. I think we probably referenced at certain points through the session today. We're getting our ducks in line in terms of our own residential provision and our own placement sufficiency. So, we're going through that process of easing that pressure. In terms of minimisation of disruption for children within the looked after system, we always aim to achieve that regardless. So that practice, and I guess that process and policy for us won't change. There are disruptions. We know there are disruptions for children who are in the looked after system by virtue of placement breakdowns and sometimes the uncertainty and instability that comes with placements. But again, I think we've got, and again, our ducks in line in terms of our placement sufficiency to prevent any increased level of disruption.
Thank you, Chair. My supplementary is, have we considered and calculated the financial impacts from the delayed implementation as a mouthful?
Some of the financial impacts are evidenced. I can't remember which point it is within the report, but there's a table there within the report that evidences, I guess, our projections in terms of on table 6, or paragraph 6.1, that evidences some of our projections in line with our looked after reduction strategy. So there's an element there where we've got some projections and some planning there from a financial point of view. Again, I think it's difficult at the moment because the market is so volatile. The residential market is so volatile, and we are seeing prices increase dramatically and costs increase dramatically at this moment in time. There is a level of financial instability there. We're doing our utmost to control that, both through our placement sufficiency strategy and through our establishment of our own in-house stock, and also via our looked after children reduction strategy as well.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Yeah, moving on to paragraph 3.9. It says the proposed structure, which is currently out for staff consultation, is a model that can support proactive, strength-based practice and would engage children, young people and their families in preventative, voluntary care and support plans in order to avoid escalating into statutory involvement. So what timelines are we working to in implementing this restructure and seeing its impact? How was the new structure designed? And have we researched and looked into other authorities to learn best practice?
Okay, I'll try and remember all the questions. So in terms of the timeline for the structure or the restructure, we commenced considerations of, we've always been toying with changes to structure and variations to structure because the nature of our work is so dynamic. But formally, we started to really look at this last October when we set up our Accelerated Improvement Group as a result of some of the pressures we were facing within children's social care. So that process started then, and we've involved staff along the way through informal consultation and informal discussions and looking at some of the rationale for changes to our structure. And more latterly then, we've gone up for formal consultation with staff, which that concludes, formal consultation concludes on the 7th of May. So 7th of May, that formal consultation concludes. We anticipate, obviously, what dependent on the feedback we get through that formal consultation, there may be some changes that will be required to the structures. There may not be. But we anticipate then that model coming into play by the end of the month. So quite a quick turnaround once we've got that formal consultation in, pending no significant changes that are required to be made. We've been, I think, very proactive in terms of staff consultation. And as I mentioned earlier, we started informal staff consultation on this process, really, back in October, November time, because what we wanted to do was, whilst I guess from a strategic point of view and from a management point of view, we had a bit of a vision in mind. We wanted that vision to develop from the ground up as well, so we had that complete buy-in from all staff. We've also involved the unions extensively as well through that process. So again, I keep using the terminology ducks in line, but it feels as if we've got our ducks in line in terms of the process there.
Okay, so sorry, that answers the first question. So how was the structure designed, and did you look at other authorities? So did you did you take ideas? Did you sort of form this structure locally, or did you take ideas from other authorities?
A bit of both there, because what we looked at obviously was what our local needs are, our local position, and we know that we've got a high looked after children population. So an element or a key function of this structure and redesign going forward was based upon our level of demand within our system and how we challenge and counteract that within Torfaen. That said, we did look and I have looked and continue to look at what exists, particularly across the Gwent region, what exists regionally, and what exists across other local authorities. And I think not just through the service redesign element here, but we're always keen to look at what's going on in other areas as well, to see where we can learn, not just through a redesign point of view, but from a practice point of view as well. And there was a second point. There was a second part of the question as well, wasn't there?
I think just to see if you had tried to source good best practice from other authorities, yeah. But I think you should have answered that.
Thank you. I have 3 questions about the graph in paragraph 4.3. Which of the placement types will be affected by this legislation? As a sort of newcomer to this topic.
In effect, Councillor, all placement types will be affected by the legislation, because I think there will be there'll be a knock-on throughout the system. Ideally, what we want to achieve is total sufficiency within our in-house foster placement provision, so that we're not having to use independent fostering agencies, or we're limiting our usage of independent fostering agencies, and similarly limiting our usage of residential provision as well. So there's a knock-on impact throughout it all. In terms of the profit element, the impact there, the impact is with residential providers and independent fostering agencies. So the for-profit impact obviously shouldn't have an impact upon us as a local authority, because we're not operating as a profit agency or profit-making agency. So the profit element will impact those 2 key areas. However, our anticipation is there will be an impact throughout the whole system, because we're trying to shift that level of need and level of demand down so that we can meet and manage it within our own in-house provision.
Those are the follow-up questions. So how many sort of children have we currently got in the sort of for-profit sector, and will need to sort of accommodate into a non-profit environment?
Okay, so I may have to get back to you with the exact figures there, but if I think of our residential cohort, particularly, we've currently got 2 children placed within our in-house Green Hill provision, and we've got a total of 19 children within residential. So there are 17 children there, off the top of my head, who I would say are placed within for-profit provision. So there's 17 there within our residential cohort that we would need to shift. Some of them will shift, as the report highlights. Some of them will shift and move out of residential and for-profit provision by virtue of turning 18 by the time the legislation comes into place. Some of them, the rest, we want to be able to maintain in not-for-profit provision. In terms of our independent fostering provision, I don't know if you know that, Kirsty. I don't want to throw a curveball at you, but
Yes, 35 children currently in IFA placements and 2 within third sector, so not for profit.
So, sort of 54, 55 in total?
yes, yeah, thereabouts, yeah. But again, an element of those, I think it's referenced within the report, a number of those will have moved out by virtue of turning 18. And again, we're working with providers within that independent fostering sector as well to look at how we best meet the needs of those children who are there. Because the last thing we would want to do, if we've got a child whose needs are being met and they've got a relationship, a long-term relationship with an IFA or with an independent foster carer, and they've been placed with them for a number of years, the last thing we would want to do, coming back to that point around disruption, would be to move a child from a very stable placement based upon financial element.
Absolutely. And my third point about the graph, it appears to show that only the placement types that are reducing involve the in-house foster placements and kinship, when will the impact of transitioning toward removing profit from children's care be felt? And how confident can this be achieved?
I think for us, it's being felt already, because if I think of this time 10 months, or this time last year, we didn't have our own in-house residential provision. So straight away, we've got 2 placements there now that we didn't have this year, so we're starting to make that shift there. Like I say, ideally, what we want to do is make a shift at that level of need and level of demand isn't at that high level as well. And what we've seen through some of the work that we're doing now, through our transition work we're doing within social care generally, and some of the measures we put in place in terms of quality assurance and processes, our residential cohort within the last 6 months has reduced as well. So in a report I presented to Cabinet in October, I think it was, at that point we had 25 children who were in residential provision. As of today, we have 19. And that includes the 2 that we have in our own in-house provision as well. So we've made that shift already, a reduction of 6 overall and 2 within our in-house provision. So we're seeing that shift being made already. There's also been a reduction, I think, within, I'm just looking at our IFAs, we've had a reduction of about 3 IFAs, I think, with independent fostering agency placements within the last couple of months as well. So we are seeing that shift and wanting to maintain that in-house.
Thank you very much. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you. Just a supplementary, and I understand there's different costs to different cases. Can I ask what an average cost of one child in an IFA is, please?
Average cost in an IFA it is in the region of £1,000 per week. Yeah, in that sort of region. Obviously, there's a variation, again, depending upon levels of need, but yeah, it's in the region of £1,000 per week. I'll get the exact figure for that for you, Councillor Seaborn, but it's within that sort of ballpark figure there.
Thank you. And can we compare our in-house provision as well, please?
Yeah, in-house is in the region of £400 per week, so you can see that variation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn. Councillor Colette Thomas, you have a question for us.
Children that are out of placed in IFA provision in England, can you tell us how they're monitored, please, with regard to safeguarding?
In terms of the placements that we have, any placement is subject to regular visiting schedules in line with the child being looked after. That includes meeting with the child on their own, meeting with the child and foster carers, every placement as well, be it if it were a placement within Wales, it's regulated through the CIW provision. If it's a placement in England, it's regulated through Ofsted. So you've got those regulatory procedures in place as well. Where we've got IFAs, whether they're based in England and Wales, we've got those close relationships with the provider, the overall provider themselves. The expectation, or not the expectation, but the reality is that those foster carers will have gone through all the same mechanisms, all the same training, all the same safeguarding procedures that our own in-house foster carers will have gone through.
Just to add, I think from a commissioning perspective, any placements made that are non-framework, which English IFA placements would be, we carry out a pre-placement questionnaire and checklist and accreditation. So we speak to local authorities that are already placing with that provider, and we carry out a number of checks on their policies and their procedures to make sure that they're meeting all the regulatory requirements and that there aren't any concerns about that provider.
So would that mean that we would be visiting the children there as well from time to time?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. So moving on slightly to 4.5, it says with 13 out of the 36 children, young people placed within the IFA provision, they reside in England. So being non-individual case specific, what are the main reasons for placements in England, and how will our work to achieving the not-for-profit agenda impact this? Does it add another layer of complication?
It does add another layer of complication because the legislation is only relevant in Wales, so answering, I guess, that in reverse order. So there's a different layer of layer of complexity there. But again, we will be looking at every child based upon their own individual needs as well, you know, whether they're placed in England or in Wales. But again, so without going into specifics of any child placed in any of those England, any provision in IFAs in England, a number of reasons. It could be that they have close family links there, for example. They may hail from within Torfaen, but they may have closer family links and networks within, you know, just over the bridge, for example. A number of our children who are placed within IFA provision as well are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. So they would be children who will have been placed within the local authority through the National Transfer Scheme. They will originally have been placed, or generally they're placed from when they come over and are residing in Kent originally. And it will be that they will, you know, it may be that they, even though they've been allocated to the local authority area, they may already be in a placement somewhere else. That's how the National Transfer Scheme works. There's also what we need to consider as well with a number of our unaccompanied asylum seekers is because of the cultural background, religious background, and their heritage there. Their needs may not be best met within Torfaen or within Wales. And for example, you know, we have a number of unaccompanied asylum seekers who are placed within larger cities where there's greater access to religious facilities, for example.
So does that mean specifically for those cases that they're always going to be there then? So you might try to move them from profit to non-profit, but for other reasons they're going to need to stay in the region that they've been placed in?
Potentially, yes. What I would say, though, is that the vast majority of our unaccompanied asylum seekers are post-16 at the moment. So again, by the time this legislation kicks fully into place, they'll have gone past that 18 threshold. That said, we continue to have that inflow as well. So again, it's a layer of complexity that we need to manage and sort of almost get to grips with over the next couple of years as to how we really best meet those needs of those children and young people, those unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, against the legislation. So again, it's almost a bit of a work in progress for us, that is.
Yeah, and I guess I take your point. Obviously, some are going to are phased out, but we don't know what's coming through. But again, that's going to be something that all local authorities are going to have to deal with. So hopefully we get some guidance on a Welsh level. Okay.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you. My question relates to 4.7 in the report. It's relating to, however, there are risks in our in-house provision may not be able to meet the needs of children and young people who require specialist placements, for example, children and young people who display harmful and sexual behaviour. And the question is, has this been raised with Welsh Government or regionally, and how can the need for specific specialist placement to be addressed whilst working towards a not-for-profit agenda?
Thank you. Yes, this was raised as part of the consultation period and has been put back to Welsh Government, and there certainly are regional conversations ongoing around how we can best meet the needs of our children and young people, particularly when they're in need of specialist placements. Those conversations are ongoing.
We do have as well, members may very well be aware of, there's a regional provision called Windmill Farm, which is based in Newport. It's a Gwent-wide provision, it's hosted by Newport. It was developed through, I think it was through the RIF funding, or maybe through the RIF funding. So it's a regional provision that when set up, had specialist health provision there as well. So we're looking at it regionally, we're looking at it locally, we're looking at it nationally as well through ADSS. So there's I think because the nature of the young people we work with, or some of the young people we work with who have significant complex needs, it's always going to be difficult to have a placement. For some children, it's going to be difficult to have a placement that's totally going to match their needs at any given time. But again, like I say, we're working on that on a regional basis, local basis and national basis.
I think it's worth saying as well, when we're looking at designing our own in-house residential homes, so as with Greenhill, we look very much at the physical spec of the property and how that can accommodate children's particular needs and any specialist needs. So whilst it's not designed specifically with children with specific specialist needs, we try and make it as flexible as possible to meet everybody's needs.
What we also have in terms of Greenhill, and maybe that Michael or Jodie may want to come in on this as well, but Greenhill has been spec'd up to the hilt in many senses in terms of the quality of it and the varying abilities and the varied usage of it. So, you know, we could use it for a child with disabilities, for example, because of how it's been spec'd up there. Or child with significantly challenging disruptive behaviour. So as we're going through this process of building up our own stock as well, we're really looking at, you know, that whole expanse of challenges and needs and how we can build the provision up based on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Price. Oh, sorry. Mr. Watkins.
Can I just clarify? So I understand that the response that you've given, and I think it is quite a complicated area. You say that you're obviously aware of the provision in Newport and sensitive provision. Currently, are we aware of other provisions, or do sometimes you have to have a scenario and then seek out where the best provision for that child is?
We are aware of a number of specialist provisions across Wales, dependent on the needs of the child. So specialist provisions with children who have sexually harmful behaviours, specialist provisions for children who have physical disabilities. Some of those are already run by not-for-profit. The majority of them are private. So that's why we're having to look at, obviously, further developing those provisions regionally, because the risk is obviously that those providers may not transition to not-for-profit, so those specialist provisions may be lost, which is why we're having those conversations to see how we can bridge that gap.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Jane. My question is 4.8. Foster carers to become in-house foster carers will continue to be explored. What incentives do we offer foster carers to become in-house foster carers?
I've referenced in my report the whole service review of the fostering service, the family placement team, and within that we increased our offer of support and incentives to our foster carers. That included, as referenced, supervising social workers being allocated to every foster carer alongside community support workers being able to offer additional support to our foster carers. We increased our financial offer to foster carers, and the enhanced allowance increased. We've also re-looked at the allowance for birthday allowances and made sure that that's available to our foster carers as well, in order to ensure that they can best support the children in their care. And we have lots of other offers around support groups. We've also increased our offer around support groups to make sure that we're varying that. So we don't just offer it in one location now. We offer it in various locations across the borough. We offer an online support group. We also offer a support group specific to men who care. We support our carers to obtain the blue light card in order to gain incentives there around financial incentives. So there's a big offer to our foster carers now, and it's something that we certainly worked hard to improve. Just to mention as well our foster care appreciation lunch and the events that we run through Foster Care Fortnight. So we very much see that as an opportunity to thank our foster carers for the hard work, commitment and dedication, and the value that we place on them and the thanks that we give them, particularly at that point of the year.
We also have as well, we know that, you know, when a foster carer has a child place, it's a 24/7 commitment, isn't it? So we also have wrote it out of our support as well. So the shut-off point for us in terms of the support we're providing foster carers isn't at 5 o'clock. It continues through the evenings and through the weekends as well.
Councillor Watkins.
Obviously, you've listed quite a few very positive changes that we've made. Are you seeing this starting to bear fruit? Is it making a difference to the number of in-house foster carers that we have?
I would say gradually, hopefully. It's always work in progress in terms of retaining foster carers and recruiting foster carers, but we see it as work in progress and certainly something we're working towards. I guess the other flip side is not just recruiting foster carers, but also obviously retaining our foster carers and making sure that we're supporting them in the best way we can. So hopefully, it's work in progress, yeah.
We've seen we've seen a net reduction of our foster placement, in-house foster placements in the last year. I think it's 4. So we have seen a reduction. However, we need to put that in the context of what we've also seen is a reduction of our looked after children population as well. So we've seen a net reduction of 4 foster carers or foster placements. We've seen a reduction of, I don't know what it is exactly in the last year, a reduction of 30 children looked after, for example, over the last 4 years. We've seen a reduction of 130 children being looked after. So we've got to put it in the context of that as well. Albeit, we want more and more in-house foster carers to create that balance between the for-profit element and the in-house not-for-profit element as well.
Sorry, just to add, in terms of the Foster Wales investment as well and the sort of unification of 22 local authorities across Wales, we've had some funding in respect of recruitment officer post, and also, we're very much working together nationally now and regionally, and our campaigns that we're putting out are really quite impactful. We're doing lots of videos in order to be recruiting foster carers and hearing it from foster carers and the children in the care themselves. So Foster Wales is certainly very positive and something that we're really valuing.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins, do you have another question?
Thank you. Yes, moving on to paragraph 4.11. It says there, we are restructuring children and family services with the aim of managing demand, reducing our spend and achieving cultural change and embedding strength-based practices. How will the EIP Hub support this? Will the EIP activity be targeted at the new children coming into the system, or also for the children and young people that are currently in our care?
Okay. Members will be aware that the EIP Hub has just sort of commenced really in terms of its operation. So in order to be able to really, we're in a position where we're able to evaluate the full effectiveness of it as it stands at the moment. What I would say is in terms of what we do know is that within our children's services front door, so at our MASH level or referral level, we have a significant number of referrals that come into us that yield no further progress. When we were looking at it more recently, there's something like 70% of referrals that come to us go on to have no service. So we're anticipating that the IP Hub will counteract that, because there'll be somewhere else where people will refer if it doesn't meet the safeguarding threshold. However, what we want to be careful of as well, if you think of, I guess, our overall county plan and vision in terms of developing community resilience and building up community structures, is we don't want that EAP Hub as well just to be another funnel into service, and we want it very much to be a process by which we're enabling people to resolve their own needs and sort of counteract their levels of need as well. So it's a work in progress really in that sense, but it's something from a children's services point of view we're monitoring closely, because what we anticipate and what we want to see is the stuff that comes in through the MASH is suitable, so that NFA rate reduces, and that the numbers of referrals that actually come into the MASH reduce as well. So there's a bit of a balancing act there. We want to see less come into MASH, but at the same time we want the IP Hub to be able to manage what's coming in through the door as well there. Because again, there'll be a significant number of what comes in through the MASH that doesn't just not need a service from Children's Services, but doesn't need any service as well. So I think the EIP Hub, that's the whole purpose of that EIP Hub, is to be more effective in managing that level of demand, that low level demand.
Okay, so does that mean then that it will only be targeted at the new families and new children that come in then? It's not going to affect the cases that we already have?
Yeah, so those cases that are within the system, so those children who are looked after, those children who are on the child protection register, those children who are part of a care and support plan, they will remain within that social care system. Unless, of course, we move them out, and we're able to move them out and we're able to enable them to not require our services, and then they require a de-escalated service or a less statutory or non-statutory service. I mean, the overall vision for us from a social care point of view and from an EIP point of view is to increase that community resilience and make people less dependent on that statutory service.
And I appreciate that you can't at the moment, it's too new to say how successful it is, but do you sort of have a timeline in mind when you'll be able to look back and go, actually, this is successful, this is achieving what we want?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously from an executive leadership point of view, we've got our eyes heavily on the effectiveness of the EIP. We've got a peer panel assessment process taking place this week as well, where through that peer panel assessment process, that is one of the questions that they've posed really. How will you and when will you know how effective this process is? I know from Dave Leach, from the Strategic Director of Communities and Adults perspective at the moment, they're developing a performance management framework there so that they're able to evaluate the effectiveness of that going forward. So I anticipate that probably within about 6 months, we're going to be able to look at where we're starting to make changes through IP. Crucial, like I say, from a selfishly social care point of view, children's social care point of view, one of our indicators will be what's that referral rate, what are the numbers of referrals, and what's the NFA referral rate as is coming in through our front door. So we've already got a baseline for that figure. So it's how we manage that and look at that. Each month, each quarter, we look at that. Each quarter within the executive leadership team, we look at that referral rate. So we'll be continuing to do that to see, is this having an impact there within the children's services world as well as other worlds.
Okay, thanks. Well, as we have colleagues, well, Michael and Jodine from Heading joining us today, it would be rather remiss of me if I didn't offer them the opportunity to provide us with an overview of their role in our partnership to provide increase our in-house provision. Obviously, we see it from our side, from a council side. Perhaps you could comment or give us an overview on what it looks like from the Mellon side, or the Head-End side, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, from the well, I'll start from the Mellon side, because obviously Mellon has been committed to working with local authority partners such as Torfaen to deliver accommodation like this, and our general needs housing, residential housing across the 5 local authorities that we work in. The difficulty with this type of accommodation has always been identifying suitable opportunities to provide accommodation like this. It's not something we can't just plonk it down in the middle of a street. So that's our biggest challenge. Obviously, we've got to have the grant funding from the Welsh Government, our own private finance. And I think it was alluded to earlier, it's getting that specification as right as we can, but as flexible as we can, and that comes at a cost. They are expensive. There are expensive schemes to deliver, and we'll have the support of our board going forward to deliver schemes like this. So it's a lengthy process, I suppose, as well, and that's something that I don't think we can short circuit. So that's from our perspective, really, unless Mike wants to add anything else.
I think what I would add there, Chair, is in terms of that lengthy process, through the establishment of Green Hill Bungalow, I was part of the setup of this with Michael and with Beth 3 years ago, probably, when we started looking at Green Hill Bungalow. And it was our first within the local authority area. It took us some time to navigate our way through the intricate details of it. The anticipation is, and I know in terms of some of the schemes we've got being set up now, that's going to be a lot faster, a lot more efficient. We've got one we're looking at now, a provision we're looking at now, which I think will be, it's certainly not going to take us 3 years to set up, and I think probably it'll be more of a matter of months to a 12-month maximum, and I don't know whether I'm setting ourselves up for a 4-year or not. But it would be a matter of months rather than a matter of years to work through that process, notwithstanding any of the adaptations and stuff like that, you know, and the building works that need to be done on any properties.
Thank you. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you. Relating to that, and I think anyone can answer this question as well, because it's both Melin and the council. So this question relates to 4.14 and bullet point 1, the development and successful opening of Greenhill Bungalow. And I've been to Greenhill Bungalow, and it's a fantastic facility. So what challenges were faced in opening Greenhill Bungalow, and what lessons have we learned for future developments?
I think one of the main challenges was finding the right property initially. That is an ongoing challenge for us in developing schemes like this, but we were lucky enough eventually to find Greenhill. We experienced a catalogue of challenges. We weren't helped by Mother Nature. There was a storm, the roof was damaged, then there was flooding to the property, which delayed the start of works. I can see Mike wanting to kind of jump in here and comment, but yeah, so there were a number of kind of practical issues that we faced. I think some of the lessons that we've learned is that we probably get the provider on board much sooner. So the care and support provider, I think we'd go out to tender as we're developing the property rather than sort of waiting until we're nearing completion, because I think it's really important that they have input into the design of that property as well. Yeah, I think that's one of the main things we learned. I think engaging with the community really early on, that's been invaluable with Greenhill, and the home and the children and the staff team have now been able to settle really well in that community and with the neighbours. But yeah, I think that's a massive sort of thing to remember for next. So engaging with the community early. We brought them into the property, we let them see the works that were going on, they met the provider, we talked about you know, the types of needs that the children may have that would be living there, and I think that's been a massive bonus. I don't know whether Mike wants to add anything to that.
No, just exactly what you said. There was an awful lot of opposition to that scheme. There was a lot of hostility locally, and obviously there was and obviously they've come on board, and everybody I've spoken to since going back to the property absolutely loves it. So we got there in the end, and obviously the biggest one for me is the funding and making sure we get all those sign-offs in place. With the housing market the way that it is at the moment, we've got to act fast to be able to secure the properties, and that's become challenging, obviously, when trying to meet the market needs, really. So yeah, it's just trying to tighten up how we can get the funding in place and obviously secure that property. And obviously I think we've overcome a lot of those hurdles with the property that we've just purchased now, so fingers crossed going forward it'll be a lot easier.
Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. My question follows on from Councillor Seaborn's, really, is 4.14, bullet point 1. What measures are we using to determine the success of Greenhill Bungalow?
Quite a few, I think. The first measure, which is a very broad measure, is how it's meeting the needs of those children and young people that are placed there, and is it enabling us to move with the care plan we have for them, and are we improving outcomes for them? That's a very broad answer in that, but our key focus within every aspect of this is around improving outcomes for children and young people, isn't it? You know? So that's one of our key drivers, and we monitor that against each individual child's care plan. Another sort of, I guess, key driver, or way to evaluate is, are we bringing these children back into Torfaen? Again, without going into the specifics, we have enabled that. We've been able to bring children back into Torfaen, so there's a clear outcome for a clear measure there for us. There's something there for me in terms of Greenhill. Greenhill hasn't been set up as a long-term placement and provision. And it's set up there so that we're able to move children on and de-escalate levels of need. So for me, for the children we ever have placed within Greenhill, or indeed with any other provision we have, it's around how quickly and how effectively we're able to move them on out of a residential provision into a family provision. You know, we want every child to be experiencing a family environment rather than a residential environment. So it's the speed and effectiveness within which you do that. It'd be remiss, of course, for me to say, and based upon this whole eliminating profit agenda, there's a financial element to it as well, in terms of measuring success through financial savings. And we know that that provision there costs us a lot less than some of our private provision would as well. So there's a financial element. The key focus is outcomes, outcomes, outcomes for children and young people and our ability to move them on. But there's also that financial element as well. And we monitor that. We monitor those care plans of the children who are there closely, and we monitor the financial aspect closely.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. My question 12 relates to 4.14, bullet point 1, 2 and 3. Additional properties in partnership with Melon now heading. What positive impacts will the newly aligned heading have on taking more regional approach with neighbouring authorities to achieving the not-for-profit agenda? So what positive impacts will the newly aligned heading have on taking a more regional approach with neighbouring authorities?
If I make a start, and I think perhaps Jodie or Michael may want to come in there, I think, because as I understand it, with the collaboration there between, in terms of the new organisation, is between Melon and Newport Homes, I guess it gives us a greater economy of scale and a greater ability to work more collaboratively or more formally with Newport, really, with that neighbouring local authority. I think from an organisational point of view, or from an historical Melon point of view, and how that's transitioned and moved into that new world, I don't know whether Michael or Jodie have got the best answer there, but I would anticipate it's around economy of scale and ability to have a bigger impact on the market.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Now that we're heading, obviously, we're a much bigger organisation than we were when we were separate, Melon and Newport City Homes. It should give us greater ability to work across all of the neighbouring local authorities. As I've already mentioned, we previously worked in 5 local authorities as Melon, but now as heading, we'll have a greater resource and potentially greater private finance and the ability to just look at things differently as when we were a smaller association. Obviously, all that should be part of our strategy as heading going forward, which will still need to be approved by our board. So that's not something I can share at this point in time because we're so newly merged. Or obviously that's all still being established. We've been set up as of a month today, so we've still got a long way to go to set ourselves up as this company before we can start making those big statements, I suppose.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Seaborn?
No, thank you.
Councillor Janet Jones.
No.
Thanks, Chair. I thought you thought I'd been quiet for a long time. My question relates to, obviously, 4.41, bullet point 3. We are currently renovating a 2-bedroom property in partnership with Melon, and we've applied for HCF small grant funding for this project. When will we know the outcome of this funding application? What happens if it's unsuccessful? Are there restrictions that come with this funding in terms of specifics of what it can be used for or what timescale?
Okay, we should hear very quickly. I can't give you an exact date, I'm afraid, but we should hear very quickly. That application is in now, so we're hoping we'll hear quite soon. The restrictions on that funding are that it can only be used to renovate and refurb the property. So it's a much smaller grant than we would apply for. Is obviously we're purchasing a whole new property and developing that. There are much smaller works that are required on this property. It's a property that we've used for emergency placements for some time now, but it really does require some updating. Sorry, can you remind me of the rest of the question?
What happens if your grant application is unsuccessful?
okay. We'd have a conversation with Jason. No, we'd look at how we can make the property usable in another way. It certainly wouldn't mean that we would give up on the property. No.
Would you be able to motivate some of the funding?
Yeah, and we may use it for a different purpose.
And the grant funding is available for this purpose. You know, it's there as part of it. So it would be, I'd be very, very surprised. I'd be very surprised if it weren't, and you know, because that's the whole purpose of these grant funding streams that have been delivered from Welsh Government are there for this sole purpose of eliminating profit, which is exactly what we're doing.
It have to be used in a specific timescale.
Yes, the funding will need to be used by April next year.
Can I just clarify that particular funding that you've applied for? You said it's to renovate a property. Is it to renovate a specific property, or just you know, whatever next property we're working on?
No, we have a specific property that we've been using for emergency placements over the last few years. So it's that property that we've specifically applied the funding for. So we've had Mellin have come in and they've looked at the works with us that need doing. So we've put a project plan together, very specific detailed plan around exactly what we want done in the property and how we want it to look. And the grant application has gone in based on that project, yeah.
I've got a follow-on question, please. We're currently seeking to acquire further property in partnership with a registered social landlord. Are we working with all our registered landlords, and are we looking at locations all around the borough for these developments? You've got the Green Hill in the south, obviously, and the north of the borough. So obviously, we have concerns with anything up there as well. Please.
When we look at the number of properties we need, we have spoken to other registered social landlords. As we're currently working with Headin on the properties that we've developed, Mike has been able to, whilst looking for particular properties, identify further properties. So the next property that we're actually going out on site on next week is one that's been identified by Mike himself, so we will continue to work on that one if it's deemed appropriate with Headin, although we have had conversations with our other registered social landlords, and we will go back to them with further conversations if we need to. We look borough-wide. That's one of the biggest challenges we have in this process, is finding appropriate properties, because obviously they need to be quite specific, location-wise, size-wise, and our ability to complete works on them that ensure that they're able to be registered as a children's residential home. So it's really difficult for us to find properties. We would like to space them out across the borough as much as we possibly could. Unfortunately, we have to just act really quickly when we find a suitable property. The next property we're looking at is kind of mid-borough. Yeah, we do our best, but property aren't available, and we have to seize them as soon as we find them, really.
With private landlords as well?
Not for this purpose.
Not for this purpose. That's fine. That's to clarify. Thanks very much.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Excuse me. So timelines can slip with funding applications, building delays, recruitment issues. What are the risks that the proposed development set out won't be completed within the time frame?
There are risks, obviously. I mean, I think we've alluded to some of the risks or some of the experiences we encountered with Green Hill, and you know, just a flood or a storm would set things back. I think, again, in terms of the learning from Green Hill and in terms of our ability to plan more effectively, that's a factor that will mitigate risk going forward here. I think, as is the speed within which we're acting on this occasion. I think if I reflect upon when we were setting up Green Hill, there was an element of, because we were uncertain around, you know, how provision would look for us within the local authority, what our arrangements would be with a registered landlord, what our care arrangements would be. All of that is resolved now, so that there are some elements that sit behind this that will mitigate any risk going forward. That's, I guess, some of the risks are unknown, or potentially unknown, like say if there's a flood or anything like that. But I think the learning we've had from Greenhill will enable us to alleviate some of that. I'm not sure that fully answers your question, Councillor.
No, I think, to be honest, it probably answers it as much as you can. Yes, we've obviously learned a lot from Greenhill. We're all aware that it took a lot longer than was originally planned, but then if all the lessons have been learned from that going forward, and you're right, at the end of the day, we can't hold you accountable to the weather. That is definitely out of your hands.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. What are the pros, cons of opening, running multiple smaller properties than a larger property with more units?
In terms of smaller property, I think the pros far outweigh any cons. I think I'm struggling to see what the cons would be actually against a smaller versus a larger property. Smaller property, I think, has more of a family feel to it. You know, if you've got less children there, less numbers of care staff changing shifts and moving around. So there's that element to it. A smaller property is more than likely going to be within a community setting, a community environment as well. If we think of some of the historical properties that existed in the old Gwent days, and I don't know whether these names will be familiar to people, like Coiglas, which was a big establishment in Abergavenny, which housed up to 30 children. Timawr, which housed up to 90 children, I think. Very isolated, very rural, very out of the community. So there's that element to it as well. The key element for us, though, I think, is around matching. When we place a child within any residential establishment or within any foster establishment, we've got to be cautious as to the needs of any other child that's placed there as well. If we've got provision for 2 or 3 children, that need or that ability to match is much greater because we're matching against less need or less varied need. So if we've got one child, if we've got a 2-bedded provision, we're only having to match 2 children. If we've got a 4-bedded provision, we're having to match 4. If we've got 8, and there's an added complexity there. In terms of a larger provision, I would struggle to see what the benefits of, say, a 10-bedded provision would be, aside from perhaps economy of scale and a financial element. But coming back to it then, this is around outcomes, and this, there is a financial element to that eliminate profit, but this is around what we're aiming to achieve within Torfaen is improving those outcomes for children in our care.
Before I put Councillor Watkins back, how many properties are we looking to renovate? I got a little bit confused. We're doing Greenhill, then we got this one and that one. So how many properties have we got in the pipeline, and how many children will all those accommodate?
So with Greenhill, we're looking at, we've just purchased another property, we're looking at another site next week, and we're renovating an existing property. So that would be 4 properties. I think that's around 13 beds. So 13 children could be accommodated within those properties. And that fits with what we've kind of estimated as part of our placement commissioning strategy moving forward and our level of need by the time Eliminate comes in.
Yeah. And in terms of that, because I guess, as I said at the moment, we've got 19 children in residential, so whereas, that provision will give us 13, we could be saying, well, there's still 6 there that there's a deficit for. There will on occasion be children that will be required, or their needs will mean that they will need to be placed at the local authority area, if there's significant or varied levels of risk and safeguarding elements, exploitation, things like that. So we acknowledge that. What we're also anticipating, though, is by having control of our own residential provision, our outcomes and our ability to move children on will be a lot quicker. What we tend to face is within some of the private providers, because again they're profit focused, and it's very difficult sometimes to move a child on from that provision. And it might be a child that their needs have reduced significantly, but that provision will be wanting to hold on to them because they're generating profit and because they're a less complex child to have there. So again, a focus of this isn't just around increasing stock, it's around reducing demand as well.
Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Staying with 4.14, moving on to bullet point 5. It says there, this has included funding being granted for recruitment officers, funding to support local authorities with adhering to best practice guidance around recruitment, and significant support and investment in respect of recruiting and retaining foster carers. So how is this progressing? How are we planning to further alleviate recruitment and retention issues? We don't want to be in a position where all our providers are not-for-profit, but still heavily reliant on agency staff recruited through for-profit agencies, with the consequence that the profit will still be extracted from the system.
I think some of this I've already touched on in terms of our offer to our foster carers, that we're continually reviewing our offer to our foster carers, we're continually consulting them and taking on board their feedback in order to improve our offer to them. And we see that as the way forward, really, to continue to work locally, regionally, nationally, and all kind of join together as Foster Wales to continue to recruit foster carers and very much share best practice in terms of retaining our foster carers. I'm not sure that's totally answered your question in any event, those.
No, I think you're right. We'd already had that, with the previous question. But if we get to the point where we don't want to be using for-profit agencies, would we then be recruiting agency staff, which would still be putting profit into the business somewhere?
That certainly wouldn't be our vision. We'd be robbing people to pay Paul in many senses. They wouldn't be able to acknowledge that. As a slight aside, we've, in terms of agency staff and thinking of agency social work staff, we've done a lot of work nationally through ADSS and with WLGA around looking at the profit that exists for agency social work staff as well, in an attempt to try and control our market. And we've been really effective in the last 12 months of being able to do. I think we mentioned on the last occasion when we were looking at social work caseloads around how we've reduced our usage of agency staff and continue to drive towards that, because we're removing the financial element, that profit element of it, so people are less inclined to work for agencies. So there's a couple of games at play here as well, which hopefully will impact on that bigger picture going forward.
I did it to carry to.
Sorry, Councillor Slack, was that you?
It was, and it shouldn't have been. My apologies. Chair, would you just allow me to dip out for 2 minutes? I will be back.
No problem at all. Councillor Jones.
Again, 4.14, bullet point 8. Having worked closely with the regional Eliminate team, who have worked alongside us to develop our residential provision, what benefits have we seen from the team, and how have they worked alongside us in helping to develop our residential provision? What impact have they given us?
They've since disbanded, obviously, but they were obviously really helpful in supporting us in putting our plans together. They were able to kind of assist in looking at data for us. It was another pair of hands, really. I think from a practical level, it was we had our own project officer, and he was invaluable, really, in supporting us with our initial kind of stage planning. I think they kind of came on board when Greenhill was almost complete. So I think what they were able to do was support us in looking at how we would move forward with things.
As it just started, you've always learned a lot, and you'll probably be able to tell them what to do in future. Thanks a lot.
I think as well what we they were used to pull sort of population needs assessment across the region together, develop that greater collaboration for the region as well. So we where they've been really effective, we know what our local picture looks like. They were effective at pulling our regional picture together, so we can have that greater collaboration. And what I would say is, in terms of them being disbanded, they were disbanded because funding, there was a limitation on the funding. They weren't disbanded because they weren't being effective.
Funding related, so yeah. Oh, that's a problem. As I said, I was just going to come in with that. Thanks, Chair.
You've got the next question as well. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Question 19 relates to 4.15. Our intentions are detailed above in respect of property acquisition. We must be careful that we do not develop more residential placements than we would require. So my question is, can we definitely say that the local authority's children's home placements are or will be lower than the cost of placements with private providers? And how will we mitigate the financial risks of running vacancies? Can we share provision and therefore costs regionally or with other authorities?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we did an awful lot of benchmarking. We looked at the market when deciding how we were going to go out with our tender for a care and support provider. We looked at cost across the private sector. We looked at cost based on other residential provision that was in-house in other local authorities. So, yeah, we did a lot of work looking at that, and we have come in under obviously private residential providers' costs. We think we've benched it well there. We certainly were able to recruit a provider on those costs when we went out to tender, so we'll be using that same methodology. We're acutely aware of the risk that we may, due to matching, for instance, be running voids from time to time in some of our properties. So we've built into the specification in the contract that we would offer those voids and those placements out to other Gwent local authorities in the first instance, and then wider Welsh local authorities if need be. Obviously, the same matching would apply and all of the same principles, but yeah, if we didn't have any children of our own locally that we could match and that placement was appropriate for, we'd certainly offer it to neighbouring local authorities.
This is where our care planning will come into effect, or comes into effect. So if we're aware that, you know, we have a child who's in Greenhill, for example, who's moving on within 3 months or within 6 months, we've got a lead-in time then when we can start that matching process. It comes back to the earlier question as well, I think, which I didn't give this as part of the answer. If we've got a 10-bedded provision and we've got less ability to match, then we've got more potential to be carrying a void. Again, so I think that the smaller capacity that we have, the greater ability we have to match, the greater or the less potential there is then for us to have any voids.
Thank you.
How will our in-house provision influence the quality and nature of care provision and the experience and outcomes of children and young people being looked after?
So we're asking there on the quality of our provision that we have. Okay, so I'll start sort of, I guess, from our fostering provision. I think we're very proud as a local authority of our foster carers and the work our foster carers do. And you know, we really do have some quality foster carers, hence, you know, stuff like the appreciation lunches and things like that we do. You know, we don't just do that for lip service and to go through a process. We go through that to genuinely recognise the hard work, the levels of commitment and the outcomes that foster carers achieve. And perhaps I'm going off on a tangent a little bit here, but we view foster carers as part of that extended team of social. They're part of the social services. They're not an entity that exists outside of us. They're part of our infrastructure within social care, really. Yes, so there's that genuine appreciation we have of foster carers there. We see some, again, wouldn't go into specifics, we see some significant achievements with children who are placed with highly committed foster carers. We see ability to move on. We see lifelong attachments. We see children, you know, moving into when I'm ready schemes from foster schemes. So we see that genuine level of commitment there. And, you know, we see that ability for foster carers to enable children to move on.
How is it going to impact, do you think the quality is going to be greatly improved with the residential in-house? Do you think that's going to have a much better outcome for our children?
110%, I would say. Again, we've when we have a child placed in a private provider, we've got I guess an organisation that's doing their day-to-day care planning. Even though we are saying this is what our care plan is for this child, we've got a private organisation there then that is you know, doing the day-to-day care planning. Probably, perhaps disingenuous of me, but I've already referenced it. There's an incentive for a for-profit organisation to have a child placed there. You know, that profit is being generated by a child being placed there. For us within the local authority, There's no profit incentive, there's no financial incentive. Our incentive is to move on that child and improve the outcomes for that child. And we've got greater control, even though we're working with a private provider at the moment, providing that care. They're providing that care within our care home in partnership with RSL, with our children, and are very much part of our day-to-day care planning. What's also instrumental, of course, is the proximity of where that provision is. And in terms of outcomes, if we've got a child placed within Torvine, our ability to work with them is more effective than if we've got a child who's placed in Swansea or Birmingham or whatever, for example, just by pure location. So I think through a number of different reasons, the quality and the outcomes are going to be much better. And we've got that child within their community, you know, within the local authority area.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sam. Bullet point 1, I think we're probably still on, whatever it was, 4.11 or whatever. Bullet point 1 tells us that 75% of for-profit residential providers have indicated their intention to leave the market completely. So two questions. How many children will this affect? And I would assume that the children affected by this would be prioritised to move into the in-house provision. And could you provide an overview of how this transition will work in practice and what support will be given to those children who are affected by the move?
Okay, I guess the broad answer to how many children it will affect would be 75% of the 19 we've got in residential at the moment, or the 17 we've got, because and that figure will vary, you know, but it will affect, yeah. If I don't know how many of those 17 children who are in residential are within that 75%, but you know, potentially it could affect them all. In terms of our planning, that's what, you know, in terms of this transition approach to eliminate kicking in, we've got that process by which we can effectively or do our utmost effectively plan for those children. Some of them will move out, as we've said, because they've turned 18 or turned that age where they're having greater independence. But again, in terms of our plan is to bring them, those children who require residential provision, our plan is to be bringing them into our own residential provision as we build up that stock. The support that will be provided to those children and young people would be the same level of support that would be provided to any child or young person within our system that's moving, or where there's a plan for them to move, you know, so that'll be based upon individual need for those children and what their actual care plan is. But there will be that, you know, there'll be that support provided to them, and that build-up of our stocks so that we're able to move towards that provision, that shift for children by 2030.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Even when looked after children are placed within their local area, assessing the necessary care, facilities and therapies is often difficult. How will we mitigate this?
Okay. Again, it can be a challenge because, you know, every child presents with their own individual needs, and the dynamic needs. Their needs are changed day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out. However, what we've obviously got a skilled workforce. We have a skilled workforce. We're equipped to work with children and young people within that setting, within the looked after system. We've got relationships, obviously, with colleagues across Gwent through, I use health, for example, and through CAMS. So we would look upon, you know, the levels of need that a child has and bringing the right support or attempt to bring the right support services and agencies to work with that child. We know that there are challenges with that because, you know, things like timescales and waiting times. But again, we would look, as we do, at every child's individual needs and pull a care plan around that child's needs. We've got the benefit of MIST within the local authority as well, who are the My Support team who work with children within residential settings and with those high-level complex needs, providing psychological support and interventions both to staff, social work staff, residential staff and the children themselves. You know, MIST has been an effective service we've had within the local authority area for probably 20 odd years or so, you know, certainly before my time. So again, it's going to be based upon each individual child's needs. We have some children in residential and their needs are very, very low. And they're in residential by virtue of us not being able to find anything alternative for them. They're few and far between, but we do. So there's some children within residential and their needs are low and they wouldn't require an enhanced or extensive service, but it'll be based upon us looking at every child's individual needs, building a care plan around those needs wherever they are within the system.
Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you. My last question, it relates to 4.17. We are reliant upon continued funding from the Welsh Government from the Housing with Care Fund and the Integration and Rebalancing Capital Fund. What assurance have we that this funding will be available for the duration of this transition period?
It's available for that transition period. That's the whole purpose of those funding, those grants and that funding. It may be year on year. Sometimes some of the terminology or some of the titles for them change. So I think when we were developing Green Hill, albeit for the same outcomes and for the same, it came from a part of money. Then it was the RIF, wasn't it? It came from them, the RIF capital funding.
And HCF is going now, so it will be IRCF.
So the funding will exist throughout this duration. It just may have a different terminology. And you know, we're attempting to draw on that funding as quickly and effectively as we can as well.
Again, is there a time? Sorry, Chair. It's an ongoing funding process.
The funding, as I understand, the funding will cease by 2030 because there's the anticipation there in terms of our planning and our placement sufficiency strategy. There's the anticipation there that us and all other local authorities by 2030 will have. I think, you know, these things again are dynamic in terms of how they move, aren't they? And if come 2030, there's suddenly, you know, I know there's discovery that local authorities haven't got all the provision they need, then there's further discussions to be had through then.
Each pot of funding is obviously made available April to March, so that's where we have to be really, really quick in securing the properties and getting the funding drawn down and able to spend within those 12-month timescales.
I think as a committee, we were always concerned that we're self-reliant on funding for a lot of these projects, and we've also got that element where we're concerned that what happens if, you know, we don't have that facility, how it affect and the effect it have on our provision for services, Chair, don't we? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Seymour, please.
Thank you. I've got the final two questions, I think. So the first one is relating to 5.1, and it's the young person's voice, and how are we consulting with our young children and young people who are currently in our system and who have been through our systems and considering their views in developing and striving to achieve a not-for-profit agenda. So how are we engaging young people in their views?
Certainly the 4 Cs, so the Children's Commissioning Consortia Cymru are doing a lot of work and engagement. They've got a children's panel made up of children who are living in foster placements or in residential placements. They're the organisation that runs the framework where we search for our independent foster placements and our residential placements currently. They're doing a lot of work and engagement with young people at the moment. What we're hoping to do, which we weren't able to do as successfully as we wanted to on Green Hill, is on our next project, we want to bring in our own Torfine children who've experienced residential care to help us look at developing right down to, you know, the paint on the walls and that type of thing, and certainly being part of the selection panel for the provider when we go out to tender. I think that is one of the lessons we've learned actually, in something where we were really up against it time-wise initially, and we weren't able to involve children and young people as much as we want to, but we're really striving to do that quite differently now on the next one and moving forward with all of our developments.
Great.
I think council as well. Obviously every child and young person we work with, I've mentioned, you know, every child has a care plan, looks into their individual needs, their wishes and feelings, so we do it on an individual basis as well. I'm anticipating all, because I'm not linked to it operationally, but in terms of Green Hill, because we've got children placed at Green Hill, we'll be learning from their experiences as well and asking them to feed into, you know, what's good, what's bad about Green Hill, what could be done differently, is the television big enough, you know, things like that.
Can I go straight into my second question, Chair?
Could I interrupt you? I think Councillor Thomas has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. My question really incorporates 4.19 and 6.3. The current indication that many for-profit fostering providers intend to transition to a not-for-profit model, and that will put significant financial risk on authorities. What are we doing to calculate that risk and mitigate it? Is there any funding from Welsh Government to help authorities with this, please?
Okay. In order to mitigate against the risk, I think that the whole premise of this report around increasing our own provision, our own in-house stock, that's one element to it. The other element to it around mitigating risk is reducing the level of need and reducing the numbers of young people we've got within the looked after system as well. In terms of funding being made available, I don't think there's anything directly available to mitigate against that exact financial risk. However, there's funding that is being drawn through Welsh Government in terms of, or has been drawn in terms of radical reform, and I forget the name of, I think there is some specific eliminate funding as well, but that's been aimed at enabling us to work to mitigate against some of those risks as well. There is a risk there because people will be changing and and converting, so that risk does exist. But our way to mitigate against that is reducing demand, increasing stock, so we get that balance. Does that answer the question, Councillor? Or?
And I'm just wondering if we got sort of a fallback position. You know, our budget is pretty stretched at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, in terms of the budget being stressed, it is what it is, isn't it? There's a pressure there. There's always a pressure within children's social care because that demand varies or can vary so significantly. Yeah, all I can say is that risk. That's it. We're mitigating against it by, in terms of the overall transformation we're going through within children's social care as well, by trying our utmost to reduce that level of demand.
Okay. Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, my final question. Are there any proposed penalties on local authorities for not achieving this agenda?
Not that I am aware of, Councillor. In terms of financial penalties, I would say no. I think that would be a bit. I'd be in total contradiction of. I think what Welsh Government are trying to achieve here, wouldn't it? If somebody were financially penalised, I think there's the anticipation and the expectation from Welsh Government that come 2030, every local authority will be ready to go with this. If we find ourselves, or any local authority finds themselves not, obviously there's going to be those continued discussions with Welsh Government. Welsh Government are clearly supporting us through this process, not just saying, this is something you've got to achieve. They're supporting us. We have regular meetings with Welsh Government where we are regularly highlighting any of the risks that are existing and any of the challenges that exist. We've got that two-way conversation going back and forth. So I can't anticipate there'd be any financial risk. There'd be, I guess, a reputational risk if local authorities haven't got provision up and running. And I guess the financial risk would sit then with, we would have to use provision, or a local authority would have to use provision that would cost more. So there wouldn't be a punishment or a penalty, but there would be associated
consequences.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Does anyone have anything further that they would like to ask? No, we're all happy. Okay, Councillor Clark, I would like to give you this opportunity, now we've finished our questioning, to make any comments or draw any conclusions that you have come to.
Well, firstly, my apologies for my little hiccup there. I had to go and attend to something in the house. Mention has been made for the foster carers lunch. I think it's a good opportunity. I know councillors Seaborn and Thomas in their corporate parenting roles have attended it. This good opportunity for us to triangulate all that's been told you this morning. A, to show our value for our foster carers, and B, and most importantly, to listen to them and listen to their needs. And a lot of the stuff that been referred to in terms of the improvement of our offer for foster carers has come out of that. I'm not saying us listening, our officers listening. I'm not trying to take credit for something that's done by other people. I think that's highly valued and important. And Green Hill Bungalow, and I still offer you thanks for giving me directions that day when I was visited and got myself hopelessly lost. But what a fantastic local provision, bringing people back into county. And I'm still going to say Mellon because it'll take me about 10 years to change the name. I thank them for their support in that, and the providers. The real strength of what is portrayed down there is absolutely fantastic. And I know the two youngsters that originally went in there have flourished in that, an opportunity they wouldn't have necessarily had out of county. So not really akin to the report, but some little tangents off it that triangulates my views of what's being done in this service area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And before we let you go, Michael and Jodie, have you got anything including remarks?
I don't actually know. This has been really interesting for us because we don't usually attend things like this. So this is, it's nice to hear such positive feedback. And like I said, there is a commitment from Heading to continue this relationship, and we look forward to looking at the other opportunities we've got in the pipeline.
Well, thank you for attending again. Officers, do you have any concluding comments? Or?
Yes, just a few things, Chair. Obviously, just to reiterate, I think as Councillor Clark, as the relationship we've got with, I'll default to Mellon as well, but the relationship we have with the RSL, the relationship we have with the care provider, providing the care within Green Hill is exceptional and has really enabled us to have a really good provision through Green Hill. I've already referenced our foster carers who provide an exceptional service, exceptional job. They're part of that bigger family and bigger team within Torvine. The one thing just to bring to members' attention is this week, by sheer coincidence, we have a CIW inspection visit taking place. So Care Inspector Wales are in at the moment looking at our fostering services. So whilst obviously we don't know what the outcome of that is at the moment because they're currently sort of heads down doing the job there, that'll be something that we'll report back once we have the outcomes that we will be reporting back to Council.
Thank you very much, and obviously thanks for coming today. If you'd now like to leave, we will deliberate further. And Councillor Clark and Michael and Jodie.
Can you excuse me? I should give a message to Jason a minute. Can you excuse me for 2 minutes?
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I shall wait till Councillor Jones returns. Formal proceedings and still being webcast. Can I refer you now to the scrutiny activity and invite you to offer your recommendations? Perhaps, Rebecca, perhaps you could remind members of our...
Certainly do, thank you. So, the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee has been invited to review the information contained within the report and following the questions that you've posed today, and determine whether you are satisfied that the activities undertaken are effective in working towards achieving Welsh Government's Eliminating Profit programme, to assess whether the activities proposed will be sufficient to achieve Welsh Government's Eliminate agenda by 2030, and then offer your recommendations to the executive member or officers.
I think there's a good report, but I think some of the questions we need on the projects in so early stages, it's impossible to give us the impact that we could have. So I really think that perhaps not so much a recommendation that this is kept on our agenda or visioning for the next 12 months.
I absolutely agree with you. I think the department is obviously undergoing a restructure. It's made it difficult, really, to sort of find out where we are at the moment and where we're going to be after the restructure, and where will we be after So, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's probably something we look forward to in our visioning at the end of the round. So, the first question then is, are we satisfied that the activities undertaken so far are effective in working towards achieving the Welsh Government's Eliminating Profit programme?
From what we've heard this morning, I think we are getting there, but it's going to be a slow process. Jane?
I think, sorry, 'cause I've read this sentence a number of times, and I think what it's asking us is, are we satisfied that the activities they're undertaking at the moment are effective in working towards?
Yeah.
So I would say yes to that, because I think they're undertaking quite a number of things. And Councillor Jones was right, we don't know the outcome of that yet, but I think they are undertaking them. I think what they're doing is effective in the planning, so I would say yes.
In reducing the numbers,
I think, would you agree with that, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Price? Yeah? Yeah. All of us unanimous then, so...
I would agree too, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Seaborn. Thank you very much for reminding me you're there.
I think the timescale, sorry, I do think the timescale is tight. I think they will have an issue, but I agree that we should keep it on the agenda.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you for keeping me on my toes. Our second activity is to assess whether the activities proposed will be sufficient to achieve Welsh Government's eliminate agenda by 2030. And I think we go back to, I don't think we're in a position to know that.
No, I think we're not in a position to get that. It's just started the processes. By 2023, we could have a lot of changes. We could have a lot of increase in the demand. So I think it's too early for us to even think about that. So I would say, at the moment, I've got my doubts.
What do you think, Councillor Seaborn?
I think I agree with Councillor Jones. I think it's a crystal ball issue. We don't know what's coming through the door. We don't know what will be leaving. So we're not. I don't think we're in a position to actually know whether we'll achieve it, but we're certainly working our way towards it.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Watkins?
Sorry, no, I think they are sufficient. Because I just think this is a step on from the previous question. So if we're satisfied that the activities they're undertaking will be effective, then surely the activities proposed will be sufficient to achieve the eliminate agenda. Otherwise, we should answer no to the first question. Surely the one follows on from the other. Or am I reading the second question?
No, but I think we had our reservations in the first one because we don't really understand what the impact will be of their staff restructure. So, yeah, I think they are different, personally. But I guess it's not open.
I think perhaps you could sort of pose it that you are satisfied that on the current trajectory, in line with continuing the work to reduce the number of children looked after, that you feel they are working towards it, but like I said, but taking on board other members' comments, that you feel you can't categorically say that, but you feel that in line with the trajectory that it should be sufficient.
Yeah,
I'd be happy.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that wording. Thank you, Rex.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Are we all happy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Right, now we have to make recommendations to the executive member. Anyone got any ideas?
I think we need to really monitor the financial instability. You know, are we going to achieve it? Do we have sufficient finances to achieve this agenda? So I think their report was very good. I think it's just a matter of monitoring to see if we're on task for it.
I think my point is very much the same. They did identify the risks. So I think we need regular sort of updates and scrutiny, perhaps another scrutiny session on it to see where we are and what we're doing to mitigate those risks, and whether what Jason said, the director said, you know, the numbers will come down to, you know, fill the gap there. We need to be sure.
Okay. My concern was they said they're going to minimise disruption, but I think we need to monitor that as well, because as he said, it fluctuates, doesn't it, the number of people we get in. So we really need to keep on board monitoring the minimal disruption during transition, etc. Or is that just an observation? Could be.
Chair, there might be a recommendation in monitoring the number of homes that actually drop out of the profit making as well, because if everybody says they're not and local authorities have not gone down the planning route that we have, you know, could be looking to lose a lot of places because of the profit dropout or not.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we would word that into a it all into a recommendation. Exactly what we're asking for. I mean, I would assume that the performance would be monitored by officers as part of their normal duties, reporting to us in what sort of, how would they report that back to us? This is the question I guess I'm asking. Whether this topic hits the basket for next year.
Perhaps as we need to just keep it in mind and, you know, for monitoring or for visioning for possible next year's basket.
Big recommendations, executive member to make sure it's monitored thoroughly and the risks taken into consideration.
That's probably the best way I would do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
And perhaps you could add that should the executive member identify an issue, that he reports to the committee. Thank you for that. Any others? Councillor Watkins.
Do we want some kind of recommendation around the lessons learned from the Greenhill Bungalow? Excuse me, because I think we definitely, I mean, it sounds like they are doing it, but we definitely want them to use those lessons learned in the way that they then proceed for all the next sort of buildings that they're doing.
So, do you mean like with reference to working more closely with the communities of the area? And there was also the point about working with children to develop. I know they said they were going to, but just to be more proactive in that respect. Do you mean?
So the positives that I noted down, like finding the correct building, getting the community on board as early as possible, talking to the young people about what their needs are. People may have come up with other ones, but I think that they should pay mind to those going forward, you know, for the next projects.
Working with the developers as well, because, you know, the care providers,
Would you say that we're pleased to hear of the provision of the Greenhill Bungalow and, you know, then add those bits in as well?
If we're going to make comment to that, I think you're right, I think that's a good comment. Are we able to also make comment that from, I think it was November last year, they've got no more placements in unregulated, they've got no more children placed in unregulated placements, because, and obviously that may happen again, we hope not, but I think that's been quite an achievement to get to that point.
Yes, I'll include that in the commentary section rather than a recommendation.
Totally agree, in the commentary section, I think we could say, I mean, it's been an excellent report. That's my feeling. That, I mean, it covered an awful lot of ground, which is why, you know, we needed, I forget what the number was, about 28 questions in the end. I suppose this, I'm just looking on my laptop now, reminding me that this eliminating profit agenda is part of a larger project, if you like, of transforming child services within Wales. I think maybe we could ask for a seminar on, you know, what the Welsh Government's roadmap is, as I see, that's what they're calling it, of their steps to improve.
I think this part of the greater programme, because I think we've discussed it on health before, of the number of privately owned residential care for adults as well, and it all came eliminating not for, you know, profit making in that. So I think it's probably all part of a wider project, you know, for all social service provision then.
Yeah, so We put that into a recommendation. Any others? I did think of a brilliant one, and then I promptly forgot about it. Do you know, I know. Old age don't come on its own, does it?
Just wondering how we could have perhaps a report on the EIP. They've gone through the consultation now, that will be obviously up and running from May. I just wondered whether we, the future committee, whether we could have what difference that's making.
I'd suggest perhaps, as I work with the chairs and the scrutiny support team to look at that in terms of the visioning sessions, because obviously EIP cuts across adult services as well, so it would be more than just this committee. So there's a lot of work. But yeah, I can look into that as an aside from the recommendations from this report, but I will make a note of that for us to take that on board.
Anyone got anything to add?
Do we want a recommendation to ask them to continue to look borough-wide for any suitable properties? Yes, I know they said they were, but I think it's, and I accept the property has to be suitable, but do we want a recommendation to say, we would like them to continue doing that, to look for suitable properties across the whole borough?
Yes, you did say that it's just the difficulty where they can find the suitable properties. Why they've got one coming up now is sort of mid-borough. I thought about it was a possibility of them utilising Torvine-owned buildings and refurbishing them. Would that save a financial saving, in fact?
I think it's difficult making a recommendation in this respect because you didn't really pose the question, so you don't know the sort of context behind that. So it's,
Sorry, I can't hear.
No one's speaking.
Oh, right.
I think,
it's gone silent, is it?
I think we're deliberating or coming close to concluding.
Yeah. I think we are struggling really to do it
Councillor Seymour, do you have anything further to add? I think we've got.
Yeah, I just think on this point, I think we could be thinking about planning and new developments and whether or not we need a children's home in a new development with a new community, and it can be taken on board with planning and new developments.
That's a really good suggestion, actually, because we're in the process of doing the replacement development plan. So,
and it could also link with Section 106 as well.
Yes.
So,
it could go in as a supplementary planning guidance, and make it a requirement on developers, maybe over a certain size. Yes, I agree. That's a great one.
But again, have we got the same issue there that we didn't raise that in the committee? So.
Although I would say perhaps you could sort of tone down the recommendation in terms of perhaps liaising or working closely with planning to identify potential properties, and rather than take it to the extent to which you propose with Section 6 and a bit more complicated.
The question wasn't asked, but the intimation was that we didn't have enough properties and it was difficult to find properties. So that was debated.
Yeah, I mean, whether, I see what you're saying about making a commitment. It would all depend on where we were, if we had enough capacity within the system, whether we'd actually need them. Okay, so I'm thinking of wrapping it all up now. Are we all happy? Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all very, very much. I thought it was an excellent. I think we had an excellent session this morning. I think the questions were quite sort of penetrating and to the point. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll close the meeting.